When we moved into my family's 150-year-old farmhouse, we knew it came with history. What we didn't expect was war with the HOA president from day one. Karen, who proudly called herself the guardian of property values, took one look at our creaky porch and original stone chimney and decided our home was a danger to the neighborhood aesthetic. Her threats started small, passive-regressive notes, fines for known compliance, and random inspections, but within weeks. She delivered the big one. She wanted the house demolished. She claimed it violated HOA guidelines, even though the home had stood long before the HOA even existed. We tried reasoning, showing her historical records and preservation documents. She didn't care. Her tone changed quickly, from firm to threatening. She told us that if we didn't comply, the board would take further action, whatever that meant. We felt blindsided, stressed, and honestly, heartbroken. My great-grandfather built that home with his own hands. Now a power-hungry melted it gone, because it didn't match the modern neighborhood vibe. But what she didn't know was who she was messing with. I wasn't just going to watch her bulldoze a century and a half of family legacy without a fight. And the moment I started digging into her past HOA decisions, things began to shift. Turns out, Karen had more skeletons buried under those HOA policies than anyone expected. What happened next? Let's just say her reign didn't end the way she thought it would. Karen wasn't just any HOA president. She practically ran the neighborhood like it was her personal kingdom. She wore her badge of authority like armor, patrolling the streets in her golf cart, clipboard in hand, always watching. It wasn't long before neighbors started warning us in hushed tones. "She's taken down better folks for less," one man muttered as he handed me our mail that had somehow ended up in his box. Another neighbor told me Karen once forced a retired couple to repaint their home 3 times in one summer just because she didn't like the shade of beige. As I walked through our family home, I could see the fingerprints of generations everywhere. Hand-carved banister, the uneven wood floor that creaked in the same spots since I was a kid. The fireplace where my grandfather proposed to my grandmother. I wasn't just trying to protect property. I was protecting legacy, memories, and a piece of our history. But Karen had backup. The HOA board, mostly her old tennis partners, nodded along to whatever she pushed. She filed official complaints almost weekly, each one more exaggerated than the last. Structural hazard, known compliance with design guidelines. Even pest risk, which I'm convinced came from the one squirrel she saw on our front step. But I had a feeling something wasn't right. The speed she moved, the way she always had legal jargon ready yet, didn't feel normal. So I started taking notes. Then I filed a few records requests, and that's when the real cracks started to show. The more I dug, the more twisted it got. Karen had been using HOA fines like her personal piggy bank. A handful of shady payments to her consulting firm started popping up in the HOA financial reports. Problem was, most neighbors never even saw those records. She made sure of it. She controlled every meeting agenda, silenced anyone who spoke up, and blamed confidentiality policies whenever someone asked questions. Meanwhile, we were still living under constant pressure. The board suddenly demanded we build a brand new fence, even though ours had stood solid for decades. Then came a notice about unauthorized historical alterations to the house, referring to a wind chime my late mother had hung on the porch. Years ago, that one hit deep. It wasn't just about rules anymore, it felt personal. But Karen wasn't ready for what came next. My cousin, who worked in local archives, found a land deed buried deep in public records. Turns out, the land our home sat on had unique protections, designated as a historic structure by the county decades before the HOA was even formed. That meant no one, not even the board, had the legal authority to demand changes to the property. But instead of backing off, Karen doubled down. She called an emergency meeting, invited a county inspector, and even got a local news crew involved to paint us as the uncooperative family. That's when I realized this wasn't just about our home. Karen had something bigger to lose. I was getting close to it. By the time that emergency meeting rolled around, the whole neighborhood was buzzing. Karen had passed out flyers, claiming our house was a code violation hazard and needed to be handled immediately. She made it sound like we were holding up progress for the entire community. But what she didn't expect was how many people had quietly been rooting for us all along. Folks were tired of the surprise finds, of the bullying, of the constant fear that they'd be targeted next. Still, the meeting felt like walking into a trap. Karen stood at the front like a queen in her court, nodding smugly as the inspector circled our property photos on a giant easel. She'd even convinced the local reporter to film the whole thing, clearly hoping to humiliate us publicly. My stomach turned as I looked around that crowded room, unsure who was actually on our side. Every word felt like walking on glass. Then, out of nowhere, an older neighbor, Mr. Grady, who'd lived on the same street for 40 years, stood up and cleared his throat. He held up a faded binder filled with old HOA newsletters and board minutes from years ago. Turns out Karen had been quietly changing neighborhood rules without formal votes, hiding it all under vague language. The room went silent. Karen's face turned pale, but she still held her ground, snapping back that Mr. Grady was confused, and that those documents were outdated. But now the tide was turning in. She knew it, just as Mr. Grady was about to flip to the next page. The HOA's legal rep, someone none of us had ever seen before, stepped forward and asked to speak. He introduced himself as a compliance consultant recently brought on board by Karen to tighten up outdated procedures. But what he said next made everyone sit up straighter. According to him, the HOA had no authority to enforce demolition of any home that predated the formation of the HOA bylaws unless it had been condemned by the city. Our home, a 150-year-old landmark, was on a historic registry. Karen had not only overstepped, she had completely fabricated the urgency. You could feel the shift in the room. But before anyone could respond, Karen pulled out a folder from her tote bag and smugly claimed she had just received new documentation from the city planning department. She waved it around, insisting that the historic listing had lapsed and that our home was now under review for removal to make way for a community wellness center. That was the moment I realized this wasn't about building codes. Karen had plans, big ones, and our house just happened to be standing right in the middle of them. The audience started murmuring. Whispers of conflict of interest and personal gain floated through the crowd. Suddenly, this wasn't just a petty neighborhood dispute anymore. It was looking like a scandal, and Karen's career might not survive the fallout. But she wasn't backing down. Not yet. The room fell into stunned silence as Karen stood there, clutching her so-called documentation. But just before the board could respond, Mr. Grady calmly took the folder from her hands, flipped through it, and let out a small laugh. He turned to the audience and held up a page. This isn't from the city planning department. This is a draft memo Karen wrote herself, an HOA letterhead. No stamps, no signatures, no file number. A murmur of shock rippled through the crowd. Karen's face drained of color. Then, from the back of the room, a man in a tan blazer stood up. He introduced himself as an investigator from the State Historic Preservation Office. Turns out, someone had tipped them off about possible HOA interference with registered heritage properties. He looked directly at Karen. We've been monitoring communications. Forging city documents is a serious offense. Karen tried to speak, but her voice cracked. Board members were already huddling. Mr. Grady made a motion to remove her from her chairmanship immediately and called for an internal review. The vote passed unanimously. But the real twist, Investigator revealed that Karen had applied for a zoning exception 6 months ago for a private development company registered under her cousin's name. She wasn't just trying to demolish our 150-year-old home, she was trying to cash in on the land with a wellness resort project already under quiet review. In the end, the house stood, but Karen's career and reputation collapsed in a single night. After Karen's removal from the HOA board, things in the neighborhood slowly returned to a sense of peace. The tension that had once filled every community meeting and driveway wave faded. Without her constant threats and power plays, people began talking to one another. Again, really talking, not just nodding from a distance. Our 150-year-old home was officially added to the local historical registry with full protections, and we even held a small gathering on the front porch to celebrate. Neighbors brought dishes, stories, and smiles. Some of them admitting they'd always admired the house but felt too nervous to get involved when Karen was around. The board appointed Mr. Grady as the interim president, and under his guidance, the HOA started focusing on real community improvements instead of personal vendettas. Karen, on the other hand, quietly moved out a few weeks later. Her development proposal was denied by the city after the investigation revealed clear ethical violations.